Good morning to folks in the balcony. Thanks, Amy. We're delighted to once again be sharing the podium with you and to join with our friends in the nonprofit world as well. The Gateway Center for Giving is a 40-year-old membership organization comprised of 72 regional funders. We help donors to connect and learn and act as they contribute their time, talent, and treasure to the St. Louis region. And it's particularly nice to join forces with our colleagues and our member, the Greater St. Louis Community Foundation, as we evaluate the philanthropic landscape together today.
Well, thank you, Amy and Deb. And the Greater St. Louis Community Foundation, we are really honored to be participating in today's event. This actually marks the first time that we have provided a body of information to the perspective of individual donors who give through the Community Foundation. Our organization is in its 100th year. January 21st, 1915 was our founding. And since then, we've been a public charity dedicated to promoting and growing philanthropy in the St. Louis region. Some of our donors are here this morning, and they were exceptional in their willingness to participate in our survey, and we thank them and for your support of our region.
So first, we had a total of 95 respondents to our two respective surveys. And the respondents ranged in size from individual donors and small family foundations to some of our region's largest corporate and family foundations, as well as private foundations. Now moving forward, I'll be talking about the institutional funders, and Amelia will be zeroing in with the individual funders. We know that the numbers we're going to present today are fairly conservative, as the respondents represent just a subset of our total donor base. For Gateway's institutional grant makers, we saw grant amounts ranging from several $1,000s to close to $1 million, with total regional giving among the respondents topping $143 million.
And for the individual donors that responded, the median annual giving was actually less than $50,000 a year, and the median annual grant size ranged from $1,000 to $4,000.
The vast majority of institutional grant makers indicated that they expect that their contributions will stay the same or increase in 2014. This suggests a stable giving landscape for institutional funders in the coming year as we continue to see recovery from the Great Recession. Interestingly, more than half of these grant makers indicated they would consider making grants to organizations they had not previously funded.
So the amount of dollars funded by individual donors to nonprofits showed something very interesting to us. While 92% of the institutional donors said that they would stay at the same level or increase, only 70% of the individual donors had that level of confidence. So in fact, 21% said it was too soon to tell. Because these individual donors don't set annual budgets, we believe that instead they watch the market and closely to determine when and where they're going to make their charitable contributions. We were pleased to see that Gateway Center found from its respondents such strong responses taking into consideration new grants. Community foundation donors seem to be a bit trickier. 68% of the individual donors expressed a willingness to fund nonprofits that they supported last year. Yet only 21% wanted to know more about nonprofits that they had not previously supported in the past. This is a conundrum. Perhaps donors are less likely to want to be approached in the traditional manners such as mass mailing and emails. Nonprofits will need to continue to find ways to approach these individual donors by finding warm connections where possible through peer relationships.
Now, when assessing what types of grants that the institutional funders are making, it's no surprise that program funding, particularly for established and therefore proven programs, tops the list. It's generally been easier to get funding for a specific program than it is for things like administrative expenses. But it's also nice to see that almost half the funders indicated that they were willing to make grants for general operating expenses. This tells us that nonprofits ought to be leaders in asking for general operating support that they need in order to run programs effectively.
Interestingly, the top 4 categories and priorities for individual donors were slightly different. 64% indicated that they're willing to fund general operating costs. 30% for capital campaigns, 21% responded they were willing to fund endowments, and 20% for fundraising fundraising events. Individual donors are more willing to provide those flexible general operating dollars and support expansion and legacy opportunities. This speaks to why it is so important for you to have a healthy and diversified fundraising portfolio.
So funders of all sizes recognize the challenges that nonprofits face. This list is very similar to the one that Amy Rome showed us earlier when nonprofits identified their own stated challenges. The main difference is that funders still feel more should be done by nonprofits to find ways to collaborate with other organizations. And this is a fact that both the individual donors and the institutional grant makers agreed upon. When it comes to data, funders often have been seen as sort of driving the demand for new numbers. And that's true in some cases, but our surveys reveal that funders generally feel nonprofits are doing a good job and they understand the constraints that you face.
So, how do funders view nonprofits and data collection? Have you noticed she says data and I say data? And she says Missouri and I say Missouri. In terms of need, they agree that you are doing a good job in collecting your data on the need for programs and the services. On outcomes, individual donors felt you did a better job talking about the outcomes than the individual donors do. And I said institutional donors felt that you do a better job than the individual donors. Donors know that you are collecting the data, but there is a gap in understanding whether or not you're using this data to improve the programs. In the nonprofit survey, nonprofits indicated that you are using the data to improve the programs, but we think you may not be communicating that to your funders as effectively as you could.
Now, when our institutional grant makers were asked whether they felt that nonprofits have the staff and skills to do effective data management, many of them, 45%, recognized you don't always have the resources that you need in this area. Gateway Center's institutional grant makers are pretty split on technology needs. While a third of them believe you have the technology you need, and some of them are unsure, 40% seem to recognize that you may be under-resourced in terms of the technology that you need for effective data management. Because institutional grant makers are in the business of giving money away, they may be closer to the needs and challenges that nonprofits are facing.
And while 46% of the individual donors felt that you had the staff or the skills to do effective data management, we noted that 40% said they had no idea. In terms of technology, 47% of the individual donors are unsure of what you need to do your work effectively. This is a huge educational opportunity for you to teach individual donors what tools you need to manage your data effectively.
Our institutional funders expressed that they were more willing to fund improving capacity to collect and use data than the individual donors are. But we can still see it's not a priority for many funders at this time.
When Community Foundation individual donors were asked if they would fund grants to increase staff or technology, 32% said no, and 41% said they were unsure. You can't ask them to fund something if they don't understand the need. This poses an educational opportunity, once again, for nonprofits to find ways to articulate what it is you need and what can be done more effectively when you have it. In conclusion, hopefully, you have obtained some new insights and nuggets of information through this survey. Gateway Center for Giving and the Community Foundation will certainly continue to do our part to work with our funders to help inform them and educate them about these practices of for data collection, analysis, and application. So all that being said, I'm sure this raises a whole lot of questions that you might have. And so we want to hear from you today. As we go through the next portion of our presentation, please write down these questions, and we'll do our best, and on the index cards that you received, and we'll do our best to give you some answers later in the program. We'll collect them after our keynote speaker, and then answer those questions. Now, we'd like to invite Vanessa Cooksey, Senior Vice President of Community Affairs, up to the stage to introduce our keynote speaker. Thank you.